Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here today to talk to you about some of the miracle stories that are happening right here in our own city, in our own state, every day. My name is Tony Koshya, and the title of our show is Tony's 50,000 Coincidence Miracles. Please note, this show is not about religion, and we're not trying to change anyone's religion, and we're not trying to get you to join any religion. It's just about miracle stories. I don't know of any religion on the planet that doesn't talk about miracles. That's why religions begin, because they have something that's telling them there's really a God. But we're not going to get into that. We're going to just talk about miracles and leave the decisions about all that up to you. So we don't care what religion you are. We just want to talk about miracles. If you are an atheist, I think you'll enjoy the program as well, although I can't guarantee you'll remain an atheist very long after you hear many convincing stories, coincidence kinds of stories about miracles. You can email me your own stories if you wish. We'll try to use all we can on the show. I can't guarantee we will, depending on volume and time, but you're welcome to send your stories on to us, and we will mention them when we can. You can send them to the following email address. But please notice that if we do use your story, we won't mention your name. We'll keep you anonymous. And we suggest that in your story, when you send it to us, don't use your correct name. That way anyone listening will not be able to figure out that it was you that sent the story in. The email address you can send your stories to is very easy to remember. It consists of 2 words and 3 numbers. The first word is Tony, spelled Tony, and the second word is and, spelled A-N-D, and the numbers are 777. So once again, the name is Tony and 777 at AOL.com. Well, let us begin. Our first miracle today has to do with something that I experienced at the Mansfield Mall in Willimantic, Connecticut. It was in April of the year 2022. The owners of E.S. Eldridge Auctioneers, who are, it's a company, auctioneers in Willimantic, Connecticut, they had a display at the Mansfield Mall during April of the year 2022, a wonderful exhibit of the sinking of the Titanic. Mr. and Mrs. Eldridge have spent something like 40 years doing research, and they have a lot of amazing facts and things they can present, some real artifacts that they even purchased at auctions where people were auctioning off memorabilia from the Titanic. So it was truly a wonderful exhibition, and I'm sure if you contact E.S. Eldridge in Willimantic, Connecticut, they'd be happy to tell you when their next presentation will be. But I'm sharing it because they shared with me a couple of amazing miracles that had happened. As you probably all know, the Titanic sunk in the year 1912. April 14th, 1912 is when it sunk. One of the stories that they related to me and had a wonderful exhibit about is there was a married couple, who worked for the ocean liner, the company that owned the ocean liner, the Titanic. And they worked for them, and they actually were on 3 ships that sunk, and they survived all 3. They certainly are the only couple on record that survived 3 ship sinkings during this time period. So it's pretty miraculous and pretty marvelous that a married couple would survive 3, and they're working for the same company, and all 3 of these sinkings were ships that were owned by that company. So that was one bit of memorabilia, and they had a lot of evidence about that. The other thing they shared with me was really very impactful story. It's a story of 2 young boys, Michael and Edmund Navratil, and I'll spell the last name because it's important to remember. It's N for Navy, A for Apple, V for Victor, R for Red, A for Apple, T for Tin, E for Edward, L for Larry. Navratil. Again, it's Michael and Edmund Navratil. The story is that their father had kidnapped them from their mother because they were divorced, and he kidnapped them and he booked rooms for him and his children on the Titanic. And as we know, unfortunately, the Titanic sunk, and one of the rules while they were sinking was all women and children were to be put in the lifeboats first. So the children were put in lifeboats, and the father never really made it. There weren't enough lifeboats, as you know, to get everybody off the ship, and so the father went down with the ship. So these two sons who were kidnapped, they were registered under assumed names, so that when people were trying to investigate and find out, how they could replace these children with proper parents, etc., they were doing their research, but they didn't have the correct names. They were under assumed names. So some people in the United States got behind all of this, and they posted pictures of the boys internationally, and the mother, who was, I think, in England, noticed the pictures and got back in touch with her children. Michael, the oldest, was 5 years old, and Edmund, I think, was 3 years old, if I remember correctly, 3 or maybe close to 4. So again, it's Michael and Edmund Navratil. And the beautiful part of this story, I think, is that Michael, who was 5 years old at the time of the sinking, it turns out that he became the longest living survivor of the people who survived the Titanic sinking. So said another way, several people did survive the Titanic sinking, and they all passed away except for Michael, who was 5 years old when it sunk, and Michael passed away as the last person, the last survivor to pass away from the Titanic sinking. So both of these stories are miraculous stories about the couple and also now about the two boys, and they did get back to their mother and had a wonderful life thereafter. Our next miraculous story is something that happened at the Church of the Holy Family in Hebron, Connecticut. I met a couple of people who actually witnessed a big part of this story and told me some of the facts. There was a woman who was helping to weed the parking lot at the church, and she was down on her knees in front of a car in the parking lot, and she was pulling the weeds out, as many other people were as well. And one of the people who was driving out of the parking lot, they pulled alongside the car that she was in front of, but they didn't see her because she was stooped down on the ground there. So they pulled around, made a right-hand turn in front of the car, and unfortunately and shockingly, they hit her. It was a hit and run, and she was really hit in a few serious ways, and she was in critical condition for a long time in the hospital. And many of the parishioners were horrified about how this could have happened right there on the church parking lot. So they were praying for a long, long time. They had, all day long vigils, etc., praying, and a lot of people visiting the hospital. And they're very happy to report that she's up and around and she's back to normal, and you'd never know that she had this problem. She was at death's doorstep for quite a while, and to be totally, fully healed after all the people who prayed, at least the people reporting this story are convinced, absolutely convinced, that it was a miracle, and they praise God and thank God because of the miracle, and we're very happy to share it with us. Our next miracle story is something that happened to me. I got an email from someone I'd been out of touch with for a couple of years. This was during the COVID-19 epidemic that we had in the year 2020 through 2022. And so in the year 2022, I got an email from an old friend, old in acquaintance, not old in age. And he asked me some questions and some advice about some things he was investigating. And he was renewing our friendship. And I responded immediately to him on that day. It was on a Saturday. And on Sunday morning, I decided, I got inspired to go to a different church that I normally don't go to in a different town, because I was going to be traveling and I was going through that town. So I went to a different Mass, different church, different Mass. And after Mass, as I was walking out of the church, and it was a very large church, there were a lot of people in attendance on that day, and it just coincidentally happened that we were both walking out of the exit together, and it also turned out that he has never gone to that church either, so both of us were inspired to attend the same church, although we rarely go to that church. On the day after his email had come in, and I had already responded to his email, and he had not seen it yet, but he was surprised to see me and said to me, "Gee, I sent you an email asking you some things." And I said, "Yes, I know, I did respond to it." And he said, "Do you come to this church often?" I said, "No, I rarely come here," and found out that he also rarely goes there. So it was an amazing coincidence miracle for two friends on the planet Earth. God showed both of us that he was dwelling with both of us, because he had these things happen. My friend had the idea to send me the email on a Saturday. I had the idea to respond immediately. And then we both got ideas to come to a church we don't often go to on the very next day. And then he had us walking out of the exit at the same time, and there was a large crowd that was exiting. So it was pretty miraculous. We were both going through the doorway at the same time. So I'm sharing this all step by step with you very carefully, because I'm trying to help everyone I can experience the joy and the happiness that we go through when we notice these coincidences where God is actually involved with these small steps in our lives. What time did you get the email? What time did you go to Mass? What church did you go to? So all of these ideas that God sends us really sets us up like he's directing a movie, or God is directing a play, and he sends us the ideas that have us as actors in a play, fulfilling our role and, saying and doing the things. And so few of us notice that God is talking to us every day with the ideas that he sends to us in our minds and the inspirations that he sends to us. Our next coincidence miracle is someone who sent us a letter about something similar. They were going to a meeting on the next day, and they had another client, sounds like it was maybe a 2-hour drive away, and they were inspired to take the thing that they had to get to the second client 2 hours away, but they weren't going to be going there that day, but they were inspired to take that with them to the first client meeting. And when they drove into the driveway of the first client, they saw the client from the second company, the 2 hours away. The client was there delivering something, and they both got into the parking lot at the exact same time. Certainly a coincidence miracle set up by God, because God put the thought in this man to bring the box with him for this trip, 2 hours away, and he sees the client right there in the driveway in the parking lot at the same time that he arrives. God bless you all. I'll talk to you next week.